Midterm elections. A high-profile debate in Pennsylvania could affect the race for a hotly contested U.S. Senate seat. Cuban Missile Crisis. What are the lessons for today from the nuclear confrontation 60 years ago? Good report card. Why Catholic grade schools got high marks during the COVID-19 pandemic. And overcoming trials. Pope Francis teaches how moments of spiritual difficulty can bring us closer to God. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 26th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. We begin tonight with the midterm elections now just 2 weeks away. Last night, several high-profile debates took place. Two pitted incumbent Democratic governors against their Republican challengers. In Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon took opposite sides whether to codify abortion in the state's constitution. In New York, Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin differed on the issue of crime. The incumbent governor favors stronger gun control. The U.S. congressman countered that street violence in the state is not limited to guns. Other candidates running for Senate in Pennsylvania clashed last night in their first and only debate. Democrat John Fetterman and Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz disagreed sharply over abortion, the economy, and other partisan issues.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all.
If you believe that the choice of your reproductive freedom belongs with Dr. Oz, then you have a choice. But if you believe that the choice for abortion belongs between you and your doctor, that's what I fight for.
Pennsylvania is one of the central battlegrounds for control of the Senate. Both sides are pouring millions of dollars into the race. Well, on the House side, Republicans are confident that they can take control for the next Congress. They hope to win big in several states across the country, including West Virginia. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
I'm in Bridgeport, West Virginia, home of the state's 2nd Congressional District, where Congressman Alex Mooney is hoping to retain his seat on Capitol Hill. I caught up with him on the campaign trail.
Really need to, in my belief, take control of the spending in this country. Not just the out-of-control spending, which is terrible. We have $31 trillion in debt. You're talking about $100,000 per person in America is debt to this country. That's being passed on to our children and grandchildren. Frankly, I think that's immoral.
From fighting to the end what he calls Democrats' out-of-control spending to passing legislation to save the lives of the unborn, Catholic Congressman Alex Mooney tells me he's committed to getting it done if re-elected to serve.
It's painful to see at the federal level bills being put through the House of Representatives where I serve that not only condone abortion for all 9 months, but actually would take tax dollars of tax-paying U.S. citizens and use that to pay for other people's abortions.
I caught up with the congressman while he was out pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, passing out campaign flyers in his district. If someone's on the fence between you and your opponent, what would you want to tell them?
I tell them to look at the policies being promoted right now by the federal government. My opponent, like many others running for office, actually believe you should subjugate your values as a Christian, as a Catholic, to the government dictates.
The West Virginia Republican says this is his 8th year in Congress, but adds the last 2 years he's seen a very radical change in the agenda from the Democratic Party, one of control and attacks on freedoms like religious liberties.
Your conscience as a religious person should be protected, and that's really a battle in Congress right now. So I'd say look and make sure people of faith are voting for candidates who will protect their faith, will protect them and their neighbors and their families from literally being forced to do things they disagree with, either at their church or at the workplace.
Congressman Mooney sits on the Financial Services Committee, which oversees the nation's housing and financial services sectors like banking, insurance, and real estate. He tells me the Biden administration policies continue to have a negative effect on the economy, and Americans are feeling it in their wallet.
When the tax dollars of Americans are spent, we need to control how it's spent, make sure that it's within the right type of framework. We have a really growing out-of-control bureaucracy at the federal level.
He hopes if Republicans do take control of the House, change can take place. By the way, I did try to reach out to Congressman Alex Mooney's opponent, Democrat Barry Wendell, for an interview. However, my emails were never returned. Pollsters have the race as solid Republican. In Bridgeport, West Virginia, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
It was 60 years ago this month that the United States and the Soviet Union teetered on the brink of nuclear war. Yet, even as the dark days of the Cuban Missile Crisis are behind us, the fear of nuclear war is not. As President Biden warns of nuclear Armageddon in the face of Russian aggression and other global tensions, the question for many of us is, will history repeat itself? And joining us this evening with his perspective is Dr. Paul Kengor, author and professor of political science at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. Dr. Kengor, always great to be with you. As we know, the situation in October of 1962 was really dire and also complicated. For our younger audience, or those maybe not familiar with the Cuban Missile Crisis, can you sort of set the stage for us?
Yeah, it was shocking. So October 14th, 1962, about 60 years ago, an American U-2 spy plane was flying over Cuba, doing regular reconnaissance runs, and discovered, to their absolute horror, that this was exactly what everybody feared when Fidel Castro and the communists took over Cuba in 1959 and allied with the Soviet Union, namely that the USSR would put nuclear missiles in Cuba. And they knew right away that they were nuclear missiles because they were arranged in this like trapezoidal pattern that the Soviets arranged their missiles throughout the communist bloc. So that information was brought right away to the Catholic president, John F. Kennedy. He was shocked by it. He went to the Soviets. He asked the Soviet ambassador if they had missiles in Cuba. Soviet ambassador lied to him, said, no, we don't. And then the Soviet ambassador immediately got on the horn to the Kremlin and said, he knows. I don't know how he knows, but he knows. And so that began for the United States this crisis of about 13 days where the president had to try to decide, what exactly do I do about this?
Yeah, and I know that you credit certain world leaders for their efforts to cool things down. This includes President Kennedy and also Pope John the 23rd. Talk to us about their leadership during this time.
Yeah, so Kennedy appealed to John the 23rd, and it's interesting because a lot of Protestants in the 1960 election said the president, the Catholic president, shouldn't appeal to the Pope, right? He shouldn't be talking to the Pope. Well, this time he did, and John the 23rd responded with a really nice message that he sent to the U.S. Embassy, to the Embassy of the Soviet Union, read it on Vatican radio. Pravda, in fact, the Soviets were so appreciative of the message appealing to peace that they published it in Pravda, their leading newspaper, their leading mouthpiece of the Kremlin. And it was only 2 days after that the missiles were actually removed. Now, we can't say that it was John the 23rd that caused that, but he played a very important diplomatic role. And one of the things that's really important about what happened, Tracy, and I wrote about this in a piece for the National Catholic Register, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara in Cuba actually wanted to use the nuclear missiles. They actually wanted to fire them. And it was later determined that there were about 162 Soviet missiles that were in Cuba at the time. Robert McNamara, JFK's Secretary of Defense, said that if those missiles had been fired, 80 million Americans would have been killed. That's half the population. I mean, we lost 300,000, 400,000 men in World War II. 80 million would have died. And when the Soviets learned that the Cubans, that Fidel and Che were actually crazy enough that they actually wanted to fire the missiles, Khrushchev called a late Sunday night meeting in the code room and said, remove them. Remove the missiles immediately. Get them out, get them out, get them out. And so it was very quickly after that the Soviets got the missiles out because they didn't want nuclear war. And I hope that's not the same of the leader in Russia at the Kremlin today, Vladimir Putin in the Ukraine, but at least in 1962, they didn't want nuclear war.
Yeah, I want to jump off of that. You know, Russia launched ballistic and cruise missiles in its first nuclear drills since it invaded Ukraine, doing that today after alleging that Ukraine is planning to use a radioactive dirty bomb, something that Kyiv is disputing. You know, all of this after, as we mentioned, President Biden recently warning of nuclear Armageddon. Paul, what's your take on all of this, and does this concern you?
Yeah, it does. And I've been worried for quite a while, Tracy, that if Putin is cornered, if the Russian army continues to lose defeat after defeat on the battlefield, which it appears to be, that they might resort to nuclear weapons. I mean, the next level has been mass conscription to bring in as many men as they can into the military. And the talk that he's been doing so far, the different things that he's been saying, talk of, limited nuclear weapons, smaller scale tactical nukes. A nuke is still a nuke. So I think it's quite possible that he could actually resort to that. The Soviet leaders in 1962, they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to unleash nuclear Armageddon. And I think President Biden, I mean, he's been attacked by a number of Republicans, a number of people on the conservative side in America for using language like that. But I think it's appropriate. I think it's a very real, very scary threat and possibility.
Yeah, very scary indeed. Well, Dr. Kengor, thank you as always for your perspective. We always appreciate it.
Thanks, Tracy. Always good to be with you.
Supreme Court Justice Samuel Leto is calling the leak of his draft opinion overturning Roe versus Wade a, quote, grave betrayal, putting some of the justices' lives at risk. The justice did not offer an update on the leak investigation, but his comments at a Heritage Foundation event yesterday suggest the court has yet to find out who breached its security. Coming up, why so many Catholic grade schools achieved success during the COVID-19 pandemic. Plus, how a court in Germany is protecting children against online pornography. Well, enrollment boomed and so did test scores. So goes the story for many Catholic schools that kept their doors open during the coronavirus pandemic. But the report card was not the same across the board. This week, the National Assessment of Educational Progress revealed that math grades among 4th and 8th graders fell in nearly every state, and reading dipped on the national exam. For many, the news is confirmation that closed-door school policies during the pandemic hurt millions of students. And tonight we're joined by Thomas Carroll, Superintendent of Catholic Schools in the Archdiocese of Boston. Thomas, great to see you again. I know that you were pretty outspoken early on about the need for schools to stay open. What's your reaction to this national assessment, and are you surprised?
Yeah, I'm surprised by the depth of the losses that have been seen in the public schools. I'm not surprised that the Catholic schools held their own and really outperformed every single state in the country, and are even higher among for Hispanic achievement and for anyone who's low income as measured by the federal free and reduced school lunch program. So our core constituencies, serving the poor and the marginalized, we just completely knocked it out of the park. And across the board, if you look at Catholic schools as a state and stacked them up against the other 50 states, we have 1.6 million students in Catholic schools. We outpaced every single state across the board. So I think it's not a mystery why. We showed up and the other side didn't. So when we had a choice and whether, as soon as we were able to after the first few months, to go back to live instructions to welcome the children back, Catholic schools all across the country, wherever they were able to, and in Massachusetts, we were able to right away. We just reopened our schools, welcomed the kids back with open arms, and got back to the work of making sure that they got an excellent education in addition to formation as Catholics.
Yeah, and I know that was so important to you. Can you kind of take us back to that time? Why did you decide to get things going, get those students back in school while others didn't?
For us, it wasn't really a decision. Every single person involved, the parents, the students, the teachers, the school leaders, the cardinals and bishops, everybody wanted the kids back in school, because everybody knew that they needed to be back with their friends and they needed to be back with their teachers, both for the social and emotional health, but also we continuously score really well in terms of reading and math and science. And we wanted to make sure that those gains were not lost. And we thought we could safely keep the kids back in despite COVID. And so we were able to keep the kids safe, but we were also to make sure that they got the education that they deserved. And it worked out really well. The kids did fantastically from a health perspective, and academically. I really want to congratulate all the teachers. They really were the frontline workers in school after school. They put themselves not knowing how this COVID thing was going to play out. They showed up not knowing whether it would take everybody down and made sure that the kids got what they needed. And the payoff for that is really obvious when you look at these National Assessment of Education Progress Report Card, because our success stands in striking failure to the people who simply didn't open their doors to children for a year or more. And it had a devastating impact. In many states, kids lost as much as a year of progress in reading and math, particularly hit hard in math, but they also slid back in reading. Those kinds of devastating results are going to take years and years and years to recover from. And that not only is very damaging to the children, but it's going to turn a lot of those schools into remediation factors. They can't focus on excellence because they have so much ground to make up for. And that's why I think a lot of parents intuitively knew that. And so we got in Boston after it was clear we were opening and the public schools were not. We got an influx of 4,400 kids. Following year, we got another 1,300, and we've been able to keep all of those kids and more. So I think a lot of the parents realized what was going to happen, and the report card that came out proved what we all feared. And I'm not happy at all that this happened in the public schools. I think it was avoidable, and I think the teachers' unions made a judgment that, frankly, I think a lot of the unionized teaching rank and file teachers didn't agree with when it was made, which was if anybody didn't want to go back, then nobody was going to go back on the public school side. It was a tragic mistake that's going to have very long consequences for these children. And my heart goes out to the families and to these children. And Catholic schools remain with our arms open to anybody who wants to enter our schools, because we've proven we get it done. We create a sense of community. And at the same time, we're forming students in virtue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Thomas, wish we had more time to talk. Unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Good to see you again.
Pope Francis warns about how the vice of pornography weakens the priestly heart. He has brought up the topic as he responded to questions from a group of seminarians studying in Rome. Meantime, a German court is leading the way in the fight to protect children from pornography, cracking down on websites that fail to comply with the country's youth protection laws. And here with us tonight in our studio is Dr. Marcel Van Der Watt, internationally acclaimed counter-trafficking specialist from the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Dr. Van Der Watt, great to be with you.
Great, wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what more can you tell us about the law in Germany regarding pornography websites and children?
Yeah, wonderful. So Germany is one of those countries in Europe where there's great developments. A recent court ruling that supports child protection measures, which may effectively bar pornography websites like Pornhub to operate because of non-compliance with laws and not making sure that children does not access those websites. Similar developments in France. There's this Me Too movement, what they call it, happening in the French pornography industry, where performers are coming out and say, but this is just rife with harm, violence, etc. And also in Colombia, we recently saw that the Colombian Senate had a conversation around pornography and sexual violence. So there's this emerging developments that really says, well, we need to protect our children, and there are effectively no measures in place to protect them and to verify age.
Unbelievable. So where does the United States fall in all of this?
So firstly, I mean, when we think about the United States, we know that at least 16 states has considers pornography as a public health hazard. But contextually, I mean, there is so much pornography production and harmful content that's being generated here, but also accessed. If we think about the context, the types of pornography that's being accessed, a lot of it, unfortunately, actual or people being depicted as children, being abused, rape-themed pornography, incest, etc. So there's a few gaping holes. Currently, one of the big problems we are currently facing is the fact that these websites effectively operate with impunity. There's no laws requiring them currently to verify age. So that is what attracts your organized criminal syndicates, and that allows this abuse and exploitation to flourish on these websites.
Can you talk to me about the damage that this does to children, and also how we can help protect and help those victims around the world?
Sure. So, children, the research is very clear. Similar to adults, but the acute vulnerabilities with children, considering debilitating mental, emotional implications, anxiety. We also see a relationship between pornography use and child-on-child sexual abuse. Over the years, I've personally investigated many cases where there was clearly a nexus between children viewing pornography and children perpetrating, as we mentioned, child-on-child sexual abuse. So there's some really great hope on the horizon through the PROTECT Act. And we're looking forward for that to become a new dawn, a new reality in the United States.
Yeah, well, thank you for what you do and helping to protect all the victims.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Up next, the Holy Father teaches how life's moments of sadness can bring us closer to God. Plus, what the Vatican Secretary of State is saying about the challenges of humanitarian development. Pope Francis says spiritual desolation can strengthen us if we listen to God.
Nessuno vorrebbe essere desolato, triste, questo è vero.
At his weekly talk, the Holy Father said in the spiritual life, a trial is an important moment. He also reminded the faithful that if we treat loneliness and desolation with openness and awareness, we can emerge strengthened both humanly and spiritually. Well, this morning, the Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin addressed the participants of a humanitarian event. AVSI is celebrating its 50th anniversary with a meeting of influential figures in the field of cooperation. The foundation wants to spark debate on how this sector has changed over the years and how it can further evolve in the future. And joining us now from Rome is Jackie Aldrette, Deputy Secretary General at AVSI. Jackie, great to be with you today. Can you tell us more about what Cardinal Parolin said this morning?
Sure. Thank you so much, Tracy. Let me just start by saying that today's event was a really significant occasion for us here at AVSI. As you may know, it's our 50th anniversary. And so instead of a birthday party, we did this conference. And it was a moment for deep reflection on these past 50 years. Actually, a whole series of moments of reflection among us as staff. And, we thought a lot about how we've gone from a couple of volunteers who made their way over to Africa to now a staff of over 3,000 people and $91 million in project funds managed every year. And it was a chance for us also to connect with and hear from really leading leaders and thinkers and colleagues from a range of fields. And of course, we had the chance to hear from Cardinal Parolin. Cardinal Parolin gave us a very encouraging message today. Of course, he mentioned the war in Ukraine and the many crises that we're facing. But he also pointed out that the title of our conference today, which is Beyond Development, the Future We Want, is bold, but it also evokes a hopefulness, which is very inherent in our outlook and our outlook on the world and on our work. He also cited Pope Francis's criticism of our dominant economic model and really the priority given to profit over the well-being of individuals and of communities. And he encouraged us at AVSI to continue to demonstrate and practice another way that we can relate with one another, a way that's based on the profound awareness of, first of all, our own human dignity, and then that of every person that we meet. So he encouraged us to continue animating places where love, respect, and mutual empowerment are the norm. Places like in Syria, the Open Hospitals project that we have.
And Jackie, I want to go back to the title of the event. You mentioned that. Can you maybe give us a little bit more specifics on why you all chose that theme?
Yeah, absolutely. So the title, Beyond Development, the Future We Want, evokes our desire to really take seriously our mission. And really, you know, this is important to us because the people that we serve, the poor, the marginalized in our world, they deserve this seriousness. And so we set ourselves up today really to be challenged. We used today as an opportunity to think big and out of the box. Because, you know, in our day-to-day work, we're really intent on listening to the people that we serve, listening to our local staff, making sure that the projects that we do and the responses that we manage are responsive to the local context. This is really our priority. But today we kind of stepped back from that and put all of that experience in dialogue with these big thinkers and leaders of the day, of our world. And we put ourselves in front of the big problems of the day as well. So, you know, there's a huge hunger crisis going on. Of course, we all know about climate change. We're very aware of the weakness of just basic services and systems in much of the developing world, education system, health systems. So we were challenged to think about not only what we do practically every day, but what is our shared responsibility in front of these big problems.
Well, Jackie, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about all of this. We really do appreciate it. Jackie Aldrette, Deputy Secretary General at AVSI. We appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.